On this episode of the podcast, I have with me David Ting. He is the VP of Engineering at Nylas. We're going to be covering a topic that we've covered before, but we're going to have a slightly different view because David has a fantastic engineering background and definitely want to get his input on balancing team velocity and quality. We're going to break down into what velocity means to him, what quality means, how his team is structured, and see if he can give us any gems and tips and tricks that he's been using. David, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for the opportunity, Amir.
Absolutely. So set some context for us. I introduced you as the VP of Engineering, but maybe tell us, what that means at Nylas and what Nylas does, and we'll get started from there.
Sure. So I currently manage the product engineering, design, and support organization within the company. So we're very technically focused. We're building a very technical product. So it's engineering led. So the size of the organization, the company is about 150 people. About half the organization actually are what I call maker roles, part of my organization, basically building out product and also supporting it. So yeah.
And I guess from that standpoint, the product itself, what does Nylas produce?
Thank you for actually catching me up on that one. So what we do is that we provide one API, very easy access to different communication stack. We're best of breed in terms of working with email, calendar, and contacts via like Gmail, like Microsoft, all the various Exchange, Office 365, as well as IMAP. We are working on AI ML aspect of it. So we look at basically collecting the data and using information so that we could automate work as well as improve scheduling and productivity of the teams through automation.
Awesome. So I know the topic we're going to cover is talking about team velocity. We're going to be talking about balancing what a team's outputting, what qualities. I guess let's start at the top and maybe set some context of how your development organization's set up. I'm probably as Agile Scrum, but maybe go through some of that for us, and we'll dive in from there.
Yeah, we are set up with a very high Agile mindset, but we basically take it with a twist. Basically, it's very goal-oriented and using the OKR framework. So our key results are very much tied from a company perspective down to individual engineer perspective. We give a lot of execution freedom to the individual makers so that they have the ability to define their work, define the tactics, and at the end of the day, accountable for the result. For example, there's a large number on the team is trying to improve the conversion from our website as well as marketing funnel down to like customer sign up and revenue. So we're like digging into all aspects of that conversion funnel and try to basically build a better first time user experience. So from a team construct perspective, we basically about half of my organization are engineers. Then we are split between like product design as well as support. My philosophy is always like build the product in a way which is super intuitive. And so that there's a minimum amount of support issue, but based on the complexity of our application and us touching a lot of PII, there's a lot of questions that hits our support organization, and we take the opportunity to make it better every time a client interacts with us.
Interesting. And I guess when you're looking at these components of velocity and quality, when you're looking at velocity, obviously, within Agile Scrum, it has some pretty distinct meanings, but what does velocity mean to you?
Yeah, so I take a very extreme viewpoint. So you'll find myself very polarizing. I actually believe on a very extreme on side, like velocity cures all. So basically what we do is going even down to the hiring process. We look for people who are fast, work hard, and can iterate very, very quickly. So I look at in terms of engineers, how fast are commits, quantity of code produced, also quantity of code need to be fixed over time in terms of quality measure, as term of velocity, basically positive impact forward. From a product perspective, we look at velocity to revenue. So for example, come up with an idea. I actually think ideas are cheap. I always say this, don't talk to me about strategy and ideas, put it into execution. So really try to shorten the time between like ideation to like tests and then basically validation with customers. We are very structured in our data collection. So we work very closely with the sales team. So we analyze like what reasons why people pay for our product, reasons why they will pay more, and reasons why customers won't buy. So we look at all of those and try to basically make the system as best as possible.
Go back to one component there. When you're looking at people who work fast and iterate very quickly, how fast do they commit? And then you're looking at quantity of code to be fixed over time because obviously you're measuring the quality. What kind of ratio are you looking for? Like, what are you what not instinctive, but what are you looking for?
Yeah, so basically, I know like this is a taboo subject because there's a lot of people who actually believe in the opposite side of the extreme. I actually believe in if you basically look at velocity coupled with impact, you actually get the perfect vision of like how impactful each employee is, especially in the remote world that we are in today, where people are not in offices. A lot of our processes are async because everybody's time of day, because their children may be at home with remote school. We want to give the most flexibility to persons so they can contribute their best. So from a metrics perspective, I look at how active you are. So how many active days, how many days do you contribute over time? I discourage like big PRs. Like if you hold a PR, open it for a few weeks. From a management perspective, actually dig in, look for exception. We dig into particular use cases, understand like, did we define the target correctly? Do we actually take the right technical approach so that we can iterate to the result or the release versus like taking more of a big bang approach? I also look at the velocity of code, like kind of like average contribution. So what I preach is consistent contribution. Try to discourage like the hero aspect. What I see is like a lot of people, I used to have that problem. You procrastinate till the end because you think you're that good. And then in the last couple of days, you basically do 10,000 lines of code a day and you meet your project timeline. We try to discourage that. We try to get the other way. We sprint fast in the beginning, get the code out as quickly as possible. We iterate really quickly, get it in customers' hands, and then they get to touch and use the product. And then we usually use a true principle of agile, getting their feedback and iterate, get the product to be better. So from my standpoint, if you look at velocity, it's actually not only like how fast you type on the keyboard, it's how decisive you are as a person. And then I believe it's a habit to be trained. So I believe like high velocity individual, it's actually habitual, it's through training, it's through a system. And then you actually could craft that behavior in a person through the right set of cultures as well as the right set of metric to adjust and give people feedback as they execute.
Interesting. Yeah, it's fascinating. I've covered this topic a couple of different times now, and every executive talks about it differently. And it's amazing how the different viewpoints all fit within the constructs of what they talk about. Obviously, I was going to ask you particularly. So, obviously, it sounds like you guys have to move fast. Like that's a part of the core quality of somebody joining your team. When it comes to making a decision, right? I'm just curious, is it, hey, make the decision fast, regardless of the magnitude, or is it, hey, based on the magnitude of the decision, we're going to slow down? How do you guys treat decision making? Because obviously, that can affect speed and how fast you're iterating. Because obviously, you don't want people to ideas are cheap. They really are. It's who could actually produce something from an idea that matters. I agree with you, but how much time do you allocate to decision making?
Yeah, so we practice this idea, basically try to think with a clear mind. So like when things get complex, things become cloudy, take a deep breath, organize your thought before you communicate. And I actually I like people communicating through writing versus talking. I feel like when you have a group meeting, when everybody's trying to talk, it's very frequent. Like the best idea is actually with the people who are super quiet in the room. So we basically organize meeting, having everybody written your thoughts ahead of time, have a pre-read, and then we discuss things when things are gray and try to get to a point of clarity. Second set of things is I try to do things that are actionable. I believe quality is very subjective. So I actually believe that at the end of the day, it's a happiness of the customer, is the quality of the product. So I actually think like when they're unsatisfied customers, when they run into issue, that's actually where the opportunity exists. I'll give you an example of what we've done last year. So we found like around communication with Gmail security, the ecosystem is super vague on exactly how you get certified with Google. So one of our customers actually came back and asked us, can you help us? We've been stuck for 6 months. And is there a way we could work through you to get certified through Google? So I dug in personally as a VP of engineering and leading a product team. So I talked to the customer, understood the issue, talked to a couple of the vendors, found there's a really big opportunity there. And then we productized it. So basically, it became our express security review process. We worked through a partner called Leviathan Security Group. And then through that, we offer streamlined process of getting somebody certified. So it went from like 6 months down to like weeks of time. with minimal cost. We negotiated because we have over 600 clients. We're able to get a discount, pass it on to our customers. So that in turn, from idea to execution took me 4 weeks. And then we actually iterated. The first version is we manually did the work. And then after the manual work, we found like it works. And then it's actually a good experience for the customer. We went down a second pass, going through a pure like a design pass, understanding what the user flow is, and then implement the user flow. So throughout the whole project, it took us 4 months. And then we launched it at the end of last year. And then this year, we tested the idea. There were like different ideas. People say, $15,000 price point is too much on a credit card. I said, let's test it. So I agree with you, but some people have really high limit. Maybe they have a black card. So we just actually saw like our self-service funnel. We have a few customers actually went through all the way to the last part, the payment, where they actually work with invoices or finance team. And then because we implemented a credit card function, now we had a first client just went through paying through. The issue here is not like the velocity is how fast you code. It's also how fast you decide along the way and formulate the problem so it's actionable so that multiple teams can actually work on it at the same time versus like it's a cascade effect. When you work with different groups, a lot of times people actually only optimize within engineering. But then for me, it's also optimizing how we work with marketing, sales, and all the different parts of the organization, finance, and then basically include them in the solution so that we can move fast as a team.
Awesome. I love the formulate the problems as actionable. I think that's a phenomenal way to view it. I was going to ask you, technical debt's it's a 4-letter word depending on where you sit on it. I haven't met a manager who always has a favorable term to talk about technical debt, but in your paradigm, moving fast is important. Talk to us about what technical debt means.
Technical debt means like it stops you from moving fast. That's my belief. So I actually invest very heavily against that because I believe that as you scale as a team, the first thing you need to do is make sure like everybody who come in can actually be productive right away. That's also a form of velocity, right? So at Nylas, we're fortunate enough, our investor have a huge belief in us. So we're growing our revenue 2x year over year. We're also growing our team size year over year. While I joined a year ago, our team was about 20 people, and now we're almost triple the size of the team a year later. So what I did is I actually, at the beginning of last year when I first joined, I took about 50% of the team basically paying down tech debt. So the first thing we invested in is CI/CD automation. So at that time, basically the deployment process is manual, goes out to Canary, use Blue Green, so it's good. But every time you deploy, engineer needs to watch production manually for 30 minutes for each deploy. So that's the first thing we worked on. We wanted to automate this. So at the end of last year, we actually did basically over 1,000 deploys within a period of 30 days. And our tests actually caught like 900 failures. So it basically automatically rolled back through the Canary process 900 plus times. We have over 600 servers that spread across 9 AZs in Amazon. So automating that, basically making that fast is super important for me. The other part aspect is basically a technical architecture. Can you move fast? Can you actually decouple the execution so that there's fewer dependency, improves the code quality, also allows you, if there's an issue, basically minimize the impact, as well as increase the velocity to the fix. So we had a monolith when I started. So a lot of investment actually went into basically build out the event bus, decouple the execution, and start moving into the microservices direction. Of course, it's going to take us a few years to get there, but we actually made the investment for all new projects to go on the new architecture. Some of the old projects, as we build out giant new features, we actually did built in re-architecture as part of it.
I was going to ask you because somebody asked me before. He said, some of your guests don't talk about their tech stack. So, what was the monolith, and where did you take the tech stack?
So, our tech stack is that you can think of us as basically a giant Python-based Flask application. It was built with Python 2. Basically, our founder and CTO was basically adopting with school of thought, like use the least interesting software to build out your stack because that's basically gives you the least risk. I'm actually the opposite. I was odd that I got hired. I'm actually the other school of thought. I said that take everything bleeding edge, and as a startup, you get an advantage by adopting bleeding edge technology, right? So I was very upfront. I said, this is the way I work. So we'll do things very differently. So imagine like we do over 1 billion requests a day and we write about 22 terabytes of data a day. So the engineering team, when I came in, like about 90% of the bandwidth on maintaining, just keeping the stuff alive. So we actually made sure that we move. So there's a couple of strategies we did. One is that there was a school of thought, like build everything yourself in Python. I actually moved away from that very aggressively. So we partner with AWS. We leverage a program called AWS Data Lab. So we architected the data store tier to move from like MySQL. We have like tons of shard in MySQL databases. You could think about hundreds of these, right? We actually moved very aggressively to Dynamo using distributed system technology. Also, from a streaming perspective, event bus perspective, we adopted Kinesis. And then we went serverless using Lambda function. So we rewrote a lot of our main logic, basically using that architecture instead. I believe that a lot of the teams basically believe like a simplified architecture is actually good. But I believe that at a time when you actually hit high scale, as well as you need high availability and fast response time, you actually need to start looking at Kubernetes, containerization, microservices, really like try to solve the problem in a more complex manner. It's harder, there's a higher learning curve, but then that allows your company to operate with more engineers versus just a few.
I was actually thinking while you were talking, I was in my head going, man, they better wrap this guy in bubble wrap because they need him to keep executing with the new paradigm and driving out that code. It sounds really exciting. I mean, we were talking about balancing quality and code, and I think your view of how fast somebody needs to iterate is very unique in the sense that, you want that speed, but also you want people to come to the table with ideas of how to attack the problem, not just, hey, I just need people to, throw suggestions. I want solutions. And then tactically, how are you going to execute it fast?
And then I'll talk about quality. We look at quality as a tech problem, right? So basically, with a very complex ecosystem architecture, we actually invested in school of thought of testing and production. So we basically record traffic from production and play it back. So then you're allowed to make really large architectural changes. So we work with a company called SpeedScale and another framework called Go Replay to do this. So our investment is more of choosing the tech framework to give us quality. A lot of the times people actually put quality in their process without understanding the level of investment in terms of cost of speed as well as cost of resources. For us, it's actually very tactical where we say, understand like we're going to change like say 30,000 lines of code a month, let's just say hypothetically speaking, right? What is the most effective way and the fastest way for me to actually reduce the quantity of errors I see from our end users? So we use concepts like chaos testing, and basically we don't actually have people manually write the unit test. We do some of that, but then we more dependent also a safety net where we basically use a bit of AI ML technique to understand what the request patterns are and randomize the string so we could actually do some of those exception testing and boundary testing automatically and detect the errors. And I actually believe that that actually gives you the fastest velocity to find the maximum number of defects in order to basically ship code very quickly. That also allows us to basically do radical departure on architecture. So for example, like we went from this monolith that's basically a LAMP stack type, right, architecture, we move it to like this distributed system. How do we know like it's parity, right? It's really through this test. We're using this technique also to actually start like try to reduce our cloud costs by moving to ARM-based processors. And that's actually give us a cost advantage against our competitors. And then we do use the same technique to do that versus like trying to basically do it methodically and try to do one thing at a time.
How do you balance how hard the team is working, right? So obviously,
great question.
Yeah, that's the other component to this.
So we actually have basically one of these unlimited, what's called responsible vacation policy for the company, right? So for me as a leader, we work closely with a people team. So we actually calculate the average number of days people take within the company. So like it's really on the average, like at Nylas, people actually are given several weeks of vacation already. And then responsible also, on the average, people take 3 more weeks, right? So for me, it's about like being smart about it. So I actually tell people like this is a marathon. You run hard and you play hard. So you disconnect. I actually practice it myself. If I myself publish my vacation schedule like 3 months in advance, so people plan around it. We basically have backup. I encourage everybody basically do the same. The second one is a practice of basically the network-based leadership, right? It's a matrix-based leadership instead of like a top-down leadership. So I practice like, say, when I'm not available, and I always believe like fast responses back to all of the business stakeholder, who else can give the answer? I cover for them, they cover for me. So, in my management philosophy, I actually educate my reports to take work away from me. And then when they're not available, I cover for them. So that's basically how we work within the group. And then just for example, like Thanksgiving, 4th of July, Christmas, New Year, we actually took code freezes so people can actually take vacation. So that one of my goals is that we actually plan right in advance, say how many people we need to support production, maybe 3 to 4 people. We gave people on-call bonuses. We give double bonus for the vacation week when we had code freeze. And then I try to encourage the rest of the team to take off during that time so they can disconnect.
Awesome, man. I think that's a really interesting view you have in terms of making sure people are pushed, but also, having the matrix-based leadership is nice because obviously you're also creating, the next generation of people who can step up and move into more, senior roles, management roles. They're getting some of that hands-on perspective as people are not there and kind of helps train them along as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that's absolutely the case. It's really like my system management philosophy is built on velocity, but then hopefully through this discussion, you could see like there's some reasons for it and it's not complete utter madness.
No, it sounds like, in the beginning you start listening and you're like, it's very fast. Like it's going to take a specific type of person to work. And then as you've been talking, you've been peeling it back. You're like, there's so much underlying structure to support that speed because otherwise, you're going to end up with a lot of sloppy code. The technical debt will be out of whack. And all of a sudden, all this work to getting to that new architecture, handling 1 billion requests a day, that's going to be a challenge. So, Dave, thanks for coming on and sharing. I was going to ask you, if somebody has a question on anything you talked about the podcast, is LinkedIn a good place to reach out to you or Twitter?
Absolutely. Yeah, LinkedIn is absolutely the best way to reach me. So I welcome additional discussions there.
Awesome. We'll include your LinkedIn in the show notes. Again, thanks for being on. I think this is a great discussion. Can't wait to get it out there. And that's it for this episode of the podcast. We'll be back again with another guest and a different set of talking points. 2 things I ask for you guys every time we're releasing an episode. One is I like the topic ideas that you guys are giving me. Just drop me a line on LinkedIn, Amir Borman. You'll find me. Give me some of those topics. And then also subscribe. Leave a review. That's how all these platforms help bubble up these podcasts and we can grow our listenership. And it's been an amazing ride so far. Thanks.